So our first conversation for today is as we commemorate the International Youth Day. We have youth in the studio, but we're looking at it from a different angle. Kasmuel McOure is an activist and he's here. Kasmuel, good morning.
Good morning, Latte.
How are you doing?
Not bad.
Oh, Pole. I have the wrong mic for you. Hold on. I'm going to repeat that again. Kasmuel, good morning.
Good morning, Latte.
How are you?
Not bad at all.
Welcome to the hot seat of the situation.
Thank you, sir.
How are you doing?
Not bad. Yeah.
So we have this photo of our champions,
Right.
Our athletes from Paris.
Yes.
And you have our athlete from Nairobi in the studio.
Yeah.
You won a gold medal.
Man,
A very thorough 50-meter sprint.
I really did.
That isn't a sprint, that's a dash.
That's a Man saw police.
Right.
Man saw opening.
Right.
It's called strategy, bro.
Yeah.
It is.
called
Yeah.
strategy.
No, but it was a madness. And I feel like that's the only part that made
50-meter
it
hurdles.
That's the only part that made it to the media. Because, people tell us that we need to dialogue and you need to be brave. That's fine. But anytime I tried approaching the cops like this, I would tear gas. And then I just got a bit crazy. I was like, no, man. At this point, we'll figure out better ways to deal with this police force.
Well done.
Yeah.
It's understood. It's not service. It's police force.
Yeah. No, this is not a service. This is a force.
Okay.
Yeah.
City will welcome you with the day's proverb.
We are in the Republic of the Central Africa, otherwise known as the Central African Republic.
Right.
Now, this country has features. There are two that I want to mention to you. There's an index called the Human Development Index, okay? And they say that this particular country, they're looking at the 2022, the index is computed out of 193 countries. Central African Republic was 191. Okay, but among the things they looked at when they looked at the various details, they estimated it as the worst country in the world to live in as a young person. I thought I would just mention this to you.
Wow.
So be glad you don't live there and that you live here. Okay? All right, now the proverb. An elephant does not limp when walking on thorns.
An elephant does not limp when walking on thorns.
Yes.
What's your interpretation of this one, Kasmuel?
Oh man, that's an interesting one. But to me, it sounds as though what would generally trouble a simple mind, what would seem super devastating to a person who's had experience, seems like a small problem because of the magnitude of an elephant, the thickness of its skin, to what we would see if a human were to trample on a thorn. It would be such a huge story. But for an elephant, it's nothing but quite literally a walk in the park. Yeah, that's what I think. I don't know.
That's very well interpreted, extremely well interpreted. Very good, thank you.
That's a very good one.
Yes.
Okay. Before we come into our conversation about, what we call, it started off as Gen Z, but now basically everybody's saying, no, I'm also Gen Z. Actually, let's just call it Kenyan citizens, agitation for better governance.
Right.
Before we get there, who's Kasmuel?
I'm a musician. I'm a pianist specifically, and I'm also a composer. Apart from performing, I'm an educator. I studied finance at the Technical University of Kenya, and I'm a swimmer as well. In a nutshell, that's the stuff I do on a daily, weekly basis, and I also make suits. Yes.
Those are his human activities.
Those are my human activities.
The superhuman activities.
Flash Gordon. How did you get into this movement? Because there's a movement that started,
Right.
And it's said that it was started, just social media, people coming out and speaking, and it was organized, and people ended up on the streets, and they ended up on the streets, and then we started now seeing people who were vocal and
Right.
visible and active. You and your suits out on the streets became immediately visible.
Right.
How did you end up on the streets?
I think I've always been a part of agitation, especially, and civil disobedience when it comes to agitating for our rights. I remember being on this seat, although virtually, about 3 years ago, when we were agitating against the lockdown. So consistently, I've always believed in in protests and protesting. So this one was no new. It wasn't a different activity. In my head, it wasn't special. I hadn't planned for it. I was going for a protest that was against an oppressive finance bill. And then that morphed into a much bigger thing. The finance bill was just a thing of a thing that was much deeper, a rot that was much deeper in the country, and a thing that was brewing. But this was going to be big, and I know this because when we marched in March, the women of the country did a very spectacular march, the best organized protest I've ever witnessed in my life, the march against end femicide. And this is how I knew that there was something big coming. Yeah, and just the organization, the consistency, and the whatnot.
You attended that march?
I did. I attended that march as well. And we were singing and chanting, and I got a bit of heat, and I was like, no, we have a femicide problem. And that's also a thing that has not been resolved, even within this current situation. There's a very jarring report that should come out around just the cases of femicide, even in relation to Kware, because Kware also came up in this movement. Yeah, so that's how it happened. For me, it was just, I believe in marching for a fair and just society. And I think that whatever cause it is we're marching is a righteous and just cause. Yeah.
So you say, and many people have actually said this, even here we've said,
yes,
that the finance bill appeared to have been a trigger. Right. But it was something that was bubbling under. There was a feeling of, discomfort with government and, just wanting things to get better.
Yes.
And the finance bill provided an avenue for people just to come together and gravitate.
Yes.
Since then, what has it become?
I don't think it has become anything, or I think it's just entering the fullness of its manifestation. Where, for example, if the finance was a scab and there was a rot or a cancer down there, it's an exploration of whatever the discussed or the bigger issue is. It's still, and it's a thing that I still believe in. I think the movement has just but begun, but there's also the role of propaganda and misinformation within the movement. There's also people trying to settle personal scores. There's also people who are in there to raise money, and that's part of what I think greatly did a great disservice and injustice to the movement. And a lot of the time when people talk about Nane, which was recently, it was supposed to be very big, but if you think about the things that transpired, by the time people were getting to Nane, state had already caught up with the fact that they could sponsor hashtags and people to just sponsor a totally different agenda. There was censorship very heavily. There was barring from people to get into town. But also, just within the citizens, there are people who sought to have private gain in the name of the collective. So there are people who will just sit down somewhere because they can design a poster. They let out the poster and they know that they can play into the anger of Kenyans and the collective dissatisfaction in the public. So if I were to debrief Nane, if it were totally up to me, knowing what I knew just the evening before, we would have called it off. But
Wednesday night?
Yes, on Wednesday night. Just seeing and knowing that there are people who just were doing this for the sake of chaos. They were just doing it for the sake of protests and sustained protests because that made them money. On the protesters' side, this is not even on state.
How are they making money?
So, when we have, I don't want to call it civil unrest, but when we have these activities that require mobilization, especially against state, there are certain progressive organizations that are willing to give people money for that. And that's why I think if I were to do it differently, the only reason I marched for Nane was for the people who actually believe in the cause. There are comrades who would come from Kibra. They would walk from Kibra, guys would walk from Githurai. And you want to tell me that now we're calling off this thing, make it make sense. Because remember, there are also very many detractors, people who just came into the wave, rode the wave, and just let it go. I was doing it for these university students. I had a university student who sent me, a guy called David, who sent me 100 shillings and said, I'm sorry, I can't make it on the street, but go and march. There are people who actually truly believe in the cause and what it is that we were doing. But there was an individualism towards it that greatly took away from the movement. That would be my analysis of it. Yeah.
What would you say the cause is?
Just the three main points that we've been talking about: corruption, bad governance, and lack of accountability. Those permeate into all the sectors that we have problems with. When kids go hungry, or when young people cannot get identification cards in time, or passports, things that people applied for months prior. And just, it's a politicization of things which government is supposed to be doing. And we have government officials looking at us and telling us maybe we have a PR or a communication problem. And we're like, no. The people look at us, young people, and say, oh, you should give the president time because he's made certain concessions. And we're like, if you're going to be altruistic about it, then no concessions have been made. And everybody but the people who've lost lives are being called to table. And we were not calling for dialogue. We were not even asking for positions. What we were doing was saying, do this right. And we refuse to be the generation that will applaud a fish for swimming. We just say, if this is what you were mandated to do, just do it.
But what you've just said, you've actually said something very profound.
Right.
See, yes, there was the Ruto must go chant.
Yes.
But then there's the narrative of you're saying, do it right. Meaning, you are in power, you're still there. Just do what you're supposed to do. Forget this going. You do what you're supposed to do.
Right.
That's it.
Absolutely. Because even if you realize that this is, it was an underbabbling hashtag, but it was a very small one. When we were doing this, we actually gave this man a chance to do it right. We gave him a chance to give us an efficient cabinet, which he did not do. We gave him a chance to fix the country, because the president has the powers to end tribal appointments in government. He has the power to crack down on graft. And when now he showed us that he was not interested, then the chant became a thing. We were not interested. People would look at it and and think we were angling for positions in government. We were angling for appointments. No. We said, put the right people in the places, do the right thing because you committed to it. And as the Swahili people say, maji ukiyavulia nguo lazima uyakoge. It's nothing but plain and simple. We insisted, now that you're in power, do this thing. So the thing that got people angry is the hubris. It seemed as though he was not interested in doing it. And then now we were just like, then clearly if you can't stand the heat in the kitchen, just step aside and let a person who's more efficient do it.
The very call to speak, as they say, to power and to tell the government you're not doing this thing right. You were essentially, this was a David versus Goliath story in this sense. Huh?
Yeah.
The president comes in as the executive, the CEO of the country, against a backdrop of presidents who have done exactly what he's doing, meaning doing exactly what he wants.
Right.
Okay. We had a bit of a break, a bit of a break.
Right.
Within the Kibaki government. Every government has these spots where you get the impression, yes, they're listening, but by and large, they don't listen.
Right.
Now, when you are putting pressure and hoping that right would be done by the citizenry, what was the plan for what we now have when the government has shown you with great clarity that they have no intention whatsoever of doing what it is that you asked for?
Right. I think that's very interesting because a few weeks ago, I don't think I would have answered it clearly because our greatest strength has always been the leaderlessness, but it has also been one of our opportunity areas to rethink our organization. Because at that point, anybody who who agreed that this government is wrong was clearly on our side. However, we did not have one clear plan. We didn't say that maybe Kasmuel had these ideas, these other people had these ideas, but it is very important, it has proven to be very important the past maybe 2 weeks, the importance of organizing and mobilizing around collectives. Because the collectives at the grassroots level are the things where now we go and listen to the people. When we go to Bunge la Mwananchi, you go and actually collect the views. When it started, we were just doing this and we had that holy rage and we were doing it from an individual standpoint. So I would go and find a scandal and say, this is it. If I'm going to be very honest, we, especially after occupying parliament, we had enough momentum and we did not think that the government would retreat to whatever it usually retreats to. And not because we were being bad students of history, but because we had taken such a great forward leap into the fabric of time that we felt as though then we were ready for this course to change. And it seemed, as you aptly put it, that the regime was listening. However, I don't want to speak of it as though it has died. We know that these kinds of struggles are protracted struggles. In 1952, it took 8 years back then. So I think those are part of the areas now we've learned, and now we know this is how to deal with the government. So it's just a matter of ensuring that we apply constant pressure. The form is where now we will have to see, what avenue do we take in terms of sustainability?
We wanted aloud in this studio and said, okay, let's take the view that the government actually does listen and said, okay, we are winding up.
Right.
Then where would we have been? Because nature abhors a vacuum.
Yes.
What would have happened?
So I think, and that's an interesting question. It used to, I think, anger me when I would be asked earlier, because it's the what next question.
It has to be asked.
Yes, which is, and as I think about it, it's an important question. Because not only does nature abhor a vacuum, but we have a whole country that is supporting you. It just will not entrust its future to people who seem as though they do not have a plan.
Yeah.
And I think very recently I came out clearly to say that our intention was to have a transition government that will lead us to the new republic, that we would outsource for stakeholders in like a multi-sectoral stakeholder, and we'd have people from the council of churches and religious leaders and those kinds of things, and then these people who would serve in this transitional government would not be in the government of the new republic.
Are you aware that every grouping you've mentioned think exactly like the people who are in power?
Right.
Are you aware?
I was about to say,
right,
what you've just said is what the president had proposed.
That's what he had proposed.
150, bringing together all those multi-sector people.
Yes.
Meet at Bomas.
Right.
And chart a way forward.
For us, it was not going to be chart a way forward. It was to take care of the country of that vacuum problem that people were talking about. However, that was the alternative.
Yeah.
The constitution itself, as it stands right now, is the biggest Ruto must go hashtag. Because everything, this Ruto must go demand. I know I will not be jailed if I say Ruto must go, in the sense that we know that CJ Emeritus in 2020 or 21, September 21st, advised the then President Uhuru to dissolve Parliament because it sat unconstitutionally and had not attained that two-thirds gender rule threshold. This current legislative house, as it is, still does not meet the threshold, and Parliament should be dissolved ad perpetuum until it attains that threshold. So we know that as it stands, and this is not a subject to litigation. You cannot now go and litigate it at the High Court when the advisory came from the Chief Justice. In the Constitution, the President should dissolve Parliament, and the dissolution of Parliament should call for a general election. It is, in effect, his own resignation. And that should happen ad perpetuum. So if we were just to sit down and say, follow the Constitution, if I just said Ruto must go, it is equivalent. The synonym is follow the Constitution, synonym is all these things. Because then if we do not have a legislative house sitting at that number, he's not beholden to have a cabinet that sits at that number, or PSs, or heads of parastatals. So if constitutionally, I don't see where the vacuum would have arisen from if he resigned.
Consider, for instance, that it's not just the political class, but the citizenry. You see, for any government to survive, it means that the citizenry, for whatever reason, are either in compliance, or they've given up, or there's apathy. You call it what you want, but they're more or less moving along.
Right.
Now, since we're talking about the Constitution, let's talk about the Constitution. And yes, indeed, the Constitution doesn't really allow for a vacuum.
Right.
If, again, by saying that ODM has actually joined the government, yet the leader says they have not joined.
Right.
It's these individuals who have joined.
Right.
Okay, we hear it. Don't you think that even as you talk about these groupings of yours, that perhaps it is time that the gathering of young people and the gathering of like-minded people right across the country started thinking of how else they can actually formally constitute to challenge, first of all, their own counties, and then bring the challenge at the national level? Because the protest showed their support.
Yes.
The Constitution allows you to have a constituent gathering.
Yes.
You do not need to be elected in the formal way through the IEBC.
Right.
Consensus is adequate.
Yes.
Because this is what these are the groupings are. You didn't ask them to go and register.
No.
No, the Bungala Wananchi, is it registered?
Kind of.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
It's kind of registered. But all those people who come there, does anybody pay them to come?
No way.
No. Is it a place that is recognized, that views can be aired?
Yes.
Why am I saying this? It doesn't matter what one likes. It doesn't matter how good one is. An element of a formal structure must always exist.
That is right.
Otherwise, the power that you have will simply dissipate.
It's true.
Yes, and I think this is something you've understood.
Absolutely.
But let me just say this. There's more learning to take place.
Yes.
Okay? There's more learning to take place because in this room we also asked, let's take the view that some of these youthful individuals were actually given positions of authority and power. How different would they be from the people that they're fighting against?
I think in this government, that's why consistently we've said, personally, I've said I would not accept a position from this particular government because it would be falling on a sword that's not even my own. Because it's a government that you do not operate as an individual. It's a government that's obsessed with control. That's why even in the sporting talent, you realize that our best sportsmen are either policemen or servicemen and women, in the sense that that's why we have all these medals, but how many sports academies do we have? Yes, everyone is basically congratulating all our heroes in Paris, but we have the billionaires who looted from our stadia. So it's for this particular government, you cannot effect change. And that's why we're saying we need a total overhaul of the system. Because however good I would present myself, the moment I get into an appointive position from this particular government, knowing that this is how it works, knowing what we know from even the former Attorney General who said, the legal advice is just like traffic rules in Kenya. They're just merely suggestions not to be followed. It would not have worked for us. So, I mean, that's why we were coming from with the whole drain the swamp, clean up the entire system. Yeah.
Change the whole thing.
Yes.
Bottom up.
Right.
Our guest is Kasmuel McOure. They're saying Kasmuel Omanyala, Wanyonyi. He's an activist. He is, yes. He's a pianist. He's a composer. He is, so what are you now? A designer, tailor?
A human being, a Kenyan. You know Kenyans are everything.
It's called multi-talented.
Yes, multi-passionate, multifaceted.
This one, eh? Yes. We talk about youth. So it started off, just like what we saw in March, which was the femicide movement, the end femicide march. People just came because there was something they were agitating towards.
Right.
This time again, it started because finance bill and the effect and direct impact it was going to have on the youth, people came out. And then thereafter it moved into, okay, by the way, actually, let's demand more accountability for the things that are happening. Of course, because being leaderless, because of all these things, then you start having various camps emerging. That shows you, even if it wasn't about infiltration by nefarious forces, it just shows you that this is not homogeneous. Yes, you're all thinking the same thing, you're all demanding the same thing, but your solution, your formula towards the solution is different. One is using pi d, the other one is using 2 pi r. You're all solving the circumference of a circle, but you're approaching it differently.
Yes.
So how then would this come back together into one? Should it even come back together into one thing?
I think the goal is unity, not oneness. The differences in approach, that makes it beautiful, makes it diverse, and it gives us more opportunities to explore different solutions. And as it morphs, there are people who will specialize and go into like different directions in terms of what we think the problem areas are. So I don't think it necessarily needs to be one thing, because eventually we are in agreement that the one thing that unites us is we want a better Kenya for all of us. We want a Kenya where we have opportunities, where children have food in their bellies, where there's no corruption, where you can get a job in government regardless of your surname. So it does not necessarily have to be us saying the same thing same time, but we're united by our problems. But we'll get to a point when we sort out these problems which are at the basic level, then I think it will continue to grow outwards. Because as it stands, nothing has happened It just seems as though it's become softer, but we are all still saying the same things. We're still saying, give us the IDs and the passports. We don't stop exporting us for cheap labor, because what's the difference between that and slavery? We're saying, stop using our money as though it were your private money. We're saying the people who took loans in our names should pay, and did not tie them to a particular development project, should pay them the way they took it. So we're about all these things, we are in agreement. It's just that you'll find some people say, oh, now you need to have a leader. Some people, those are I feel like those are the superficial problems. These are things which can be sorted out without even listening to those voices. Yeah.
But you see, those challenges have always been there.
Yes.
Even before the finance bill protests, those challenges were there. And there was, a common understanding that, we need better governance.
Right.
We need better leadership.
Right.
And it comes up every time there's an election. People are like, what, we are looking for a better leader, better solution, better way of moving. We just don't see that we are recycling the same people.
Right.
But, this has helped us to see that as well.
Yes.
If you do not have a sustained voice,
yes,
like we saw in May, June, then we may just get back into May, June last year.
Right.
Where, it was the same issues. People are saying we need IDs, we need passports, we need job opportunities, we need a government that serves the people, we need a government that listens, we need our debts to be audited, and we need all those questions were there.
Right.
How do you sustain this?
I think, and I'm very optimistic when I say that the thing has not died in any way, shape, or form, in the sense that we are currently organizing at the grassroots levels, at community centers, where you don't now have to be in Nairobi. Bunge la Mwananchi, you could attend it from anywhere. We're going through those bunges and first listening to the people. When you have an opportunity, go and present this petition, this form, wherever it is that you're going to be. And we've seen that the government is also very keen, because before we did Nane on Wednesday and Tuesday, we had, on Wednesday specifically, we had about 10 people's assemblies, and they were all violently dispersed. We'd have cases of police raiding social justice centers, the offices. We've had individuals who we've had to even move from their houses because they've been directly targeted. So it cannot die, because there's structure at those community levels. At the social justice centers, there are very clear structures. And that's why I keep on insisting on, you have to submit to a collective. You will not, at this point, for us to keep on going with the change that we're agitating for, you will not just be allowed to put out a poster because you are a graphic designer or because you have 100,000 followers on X. We will not allow it. We've said, submit yourself to a collective. Go and say, this is my idea. Then the people are going to tell you whether or not we are marching forward. Because right now, you've seen a lot of people are now putting out posters saying, Mandamano yesterday, Mandamano today. Now you expect, and this is the expectation, that these leading voices should be there. So there's a young person who's saying, Kasmuel, give me direction. Yep. And I'm like, no, do not go for that protest, because these are innocent children. And we've seen that the police force is not willing to deal with these people as unarmed citizens. You saw when we were in court on Friday, we spent the entire day. And I saw a lot of people asking, do these people look like anarchists? Because we actually occupied the courts. And the thing that the government did is... what happened on Nane, people were lifted off the streets very early. I know a friend who activated for only 20 minutes, and then he called me. He's like, man, we are lying flat-footed and we're being taken to Central.
Wow.
However, they bundled up all the leading voices, about 104 young people who previously did not know each other. These people spent a night in the cell, so there's camaraderie, and we spent an entire day in court.
Now they know
now we know each other, and we know exactly how to find each other. So in my head, the way I see it, I was like, I previously thought that I was the only one who could make this noise. I've met 100 more. So to me, it just has begun. It's just but begun. So we will organize at community level. We will not allow people to just use this movement for their own clout, because there are people who are using it to chase clout.
But how do you know that? When you say we will not allow, how do you know? How do you come to me and tell me that no, you have a different agenda from?
I'll ask you, what collective are you a part of? Because
why should I be in a collective?
I think you should be in a collective if we're looking for the common good. So, for example, you might have your ID. I have my ID, but I'm fighting for people who do not have IDs. I can't just, you can't do it nefariously, so to speak. There are people who just think that this is an agenda, like people who go to protest by themselves. That is also very welcome, but you will not ask the whole nation to occupy a thing. For example, like people who are saying occupy State House. People who are even saying occupy State House on Wednesday this week. You're saying it as who? I've seen a person who put out the poster, and now I ask them, as who? are you a part of a collective? Because you cannot now lead people's children to a place, because we've said very clearly that there are various grassroots organizations, and they're very close. They're not too far. You can join. There are very many social justice centers. Go there, because these are people who've been doing this for their entire lives. They're people who've just hopped onto this thing because it's the latest trend. So it's very easy to know these leading voices. We are saying you're one of the leading voices here on socials. You will use your socials responsibly, because if we are holding these politicians to the same account, we cannot be playing. Because what about the people who've been benefiting from these demonstrations? They are in effect no different from these politicians, because people have died and you've lined your pockets with donor money, and we know them. So that's now why we are saying, and I can say this authoritatively, because when I speak, I'm not speaking on my own. I'm speaking as part of a collective, a person who submitted themselves. And I was doing this as a solo person. And they asked me, how can you do it alone? There's a group where you can find support, where you can find literature, where we can educate ourselves on political thought. Because the challenge we had even when we were starting, people just thought Gen Zs are people who will get onto a space, throw a few F-bombs here and there, and then go. But we are not politically vacuous. We know very well that this is what we want for the healthcare sector. These are the people we want to emulate. This is the kind of vision we have. And it works better if we submit ourselves to a collective.
What are these collectives? Which one do you belong to?
Now, there's a merger between Mathare Social Justice Center, Dandora, Kasarani, and all over the country. And so especially here in Nairobi, so those are ones which I'm submitting myself to attend these meetings, and we talk at community level. So we go into the town halls, and we sit down and we say, these are the things that are assailing us, and these are the actions that we intend to take. So currently that collection is about 49 little collectives which have met in Nairobi.
So social justice centers
and grassroots organizations. Yes, about 49 of them that now are currently meeting, and that will even be meeting. We'll be meeting later today to one debrief on Nane and discuss steps forward.
Can people belong to any other? Can I form a collective?
Yes.
So I can come out and actually release some social media posters and say, I am going to town on Wednesday. If you'd like, join me.
But you have to tell us as who?
As Eric.
Yes,
as a citizen, as an active citizen.
So as an active
I want
citizen.
to go out and I want to say that if you are interested, come and join me.
Yes.
We shall be meeting in Uhuru Park on Wednesday at 2 p.m.
Right.
Yes. So then you can ask me who I am. I'll tell you, I'm Eric. I have every right to call out people just as much as you do.
You absolutely do. But then what we'll question is the agenda. And then now, yes, as much as you have the right, we also have the right to see whether or not we will join that protest. Yeah, so as a collective, we're not gatekeeping or policing. We're looking for what has the best interest of the people at heart. Because I'll give you an example.
That is gatekeeping.
Oh, it is.
Yes.
Whatever.
Gatekeeping isn't a negative thing.
Yeah.
In any setup, there has to be some form of order.
Right.
It just can't be helter-skelter. You'll achieve nothing.
That's the...
What? No, sorry, that statement is not correct. You'll achieve a lot of noise.
Right.
But what it is that you purport and you claim to seek, you will certainly not achieve.
Right.
You see, I'm listening to you, and I'm listening to the one thing that I've heard consistently, and which makes a heck of a lot of sense. Constantly referencing the Constitution.
Yes.
But beyond the Constitution, there's something called statecraft.
Yes.
This animal you're fighting is not an individual. It's also a collective.
Yes.
And this collective has a way in which it functions. Now, they seem to be taking time to understand how you function. Are you taking time to understand how they function?
Now we are. Now we are in the sense that even the politicians who are coming up as activists, for example, they seem to have very little effect to what their collective is.
Be careful. Politicians are a bit unreliable.
Yes, that's what we're saying. If in the state machinery, their activism seems to do very little against their movement.
No. In this country, no. The musical chairs that they play with every season and with every presidential season, government season, tells you exactly what they are. I am actually talking about the mandarins in government.
Yes.
You're talking PS, you're talking director, you're talking what? How government works.
Right.
There's a way in which it works.
Yes.
And it's something that is studied and you need to understand it.
Right.
In understanding it, you may be able to now think about fostering change.
Yes.
Among the groupings that you have, there are people who have political ambitions.
Yes.
It is absolutely useless if you have political ambition, in my opinion, and you don't understand how this thing you want to get into.
Right.
Forget the Kenyan politics, the way you say this. Put that aside.
Yeah.
You've seen how that way it gets us.
Yes.
Actually understanding. If today the president woke up and said, okay, this is what we're going to do. With these PSs, we want to bring in some 10 youths.
Yes.
10.
Yes.
You'll be taken through some process of understanding how things work.
Right.
Wouldn't it be better if you actually understood it before you got there?
It really would.
Or among your people, so you know this is what needs to be done. Because you can make a political appointment.
Yeah.
But if someone doesn't understand statecraft, man, circles will be run around you.
Absolutely.
And very little will actually move in your docket.
Yes.
It's what happens with many ministers.
Yes.
So they come into the ideas, all right.
Right.
But it's not them who really run the show.
It's true.
They appear to, but they don't really run the show.
Right.
Now, the numbers that the group you belong to present, close to 35 and under, close to 70% of the voting population. This is not a ticking time bomb. This is a ticking nuclear bomb.
Right.
Okay?
Yeah.
It is huge. Now, the focus on how these numbers can actually be utilized, should that not be at the center of your discussion? Not just arming it so that you are seen to be challenging the government, but seen to be actually seeking to understand how a better government ought to be and tooling yourselves for that better government.
Right. And I think we actually are doing that with our civic education programs, translating bills and the constitution into various vernacular languages, trying to overcome this monster that is tribalism.
Yep.
And you know, with this government of national unity, it sets the state back to those tribal cocoons, because there seems to be a sort of appeasement when it comes to those tribal allegiances. But there's something very impactful that you've said, CT, in terms of understanding that the state and its craft, it's a system that works so well that even the people who seem like outliers do not affect its working, its inner workings.
No.
So anyone who's come out vocally, who's a politician, who's come out vocally and bashed the state, has done nothing to how the state works. It's the same thing which now are saying we will need to consider that even if we need to figure out how the collective works, and we actually have, such that if one outlier comes out with these new strange heretic ideas, it will not affect the general collective good, because what we are looking for in vain terms is a superior happiness of our people, the utmost superior life for the people that we represent. So if you come out with a thing which we think is nefarious, if we know that this man is doing this thing for funding, we will tell the people of the collective, hey, listen, do not send your children there. Because I will give you a story where someone has fundraised and we know that they have received the money and there's proof. And instead of them bringing the money to the collective, they say, approach a few individuals and ask them, how many t-shirts do you want? And do all these kinds of things, just as politicians would.
Okay.
And so that's those are some of the individuals, because we know them. We've said, now if you do not submit to the collective, go and take your games over there. Because what we're doing it involves lives. Anytime we go.
What effect does that have? Okay, so the person is fundraising.
Yeah.
They receive some support.
Right.
They purchase t-shirts, they distribute t-shirts.
Yes.
It's only that they have not come to this collective to report.
Yeah.
So what's wrong with that?
You know, the beautiful thing is these people have the money, but they do not have the influence or the people. It's the collectives that have the people. It's the collective that has the generals who are willing to set boots on the streets. Yeah, so you might have the money, but I dare you to go out there and bring a crowd of 100.
See, herein you have a microcosm of what would happen if Gen Zs were in parliament, they were cabinet ministers, and even the president.
Yes.
This thing is just discussed.
Yes.
And you would take us in directions that are even far more disastrous than what the president seems to be taking us to right now.
I oppose it, because we've not participated in mass murder.
I'll tell you what.
Right.
Not yet.
Yes.
Because you haven't gotten the levers of power.
Yes.
So what City is saying is that if you got the levers of power, and some of you would then be able to go and mobilize some resources to come and use on one side, and others
It's a microcosm.
Yes, I see exactly
What
what
do you
mean.
think these people whom we keep saying seem to be thickening our eyes and ears with
Yes.
this morbid display of ill-gotten gains? What do you think that is? It's exactly that.
Right.
That's the limitation that they have currently.
Yes.
Imagine what they would do if they had a position.
Right. I see exactly what you mean. And that's why I think on the break I was saying that it's taking if you hear us talk about it, we talk about it in a socialistic, almost communistic point of view when we're talking about the leaderlessness, the formlessness. But it's because the limelight is not on those people.
All those movements,
Yes.
my brother,
Right.
had leaders. Believe me.
No, absolutely.
And there's not. Again, let me repeat something which I think is important to be said. Everything you've told us so far is actually good.
Right.
Nothing wrong with having begun as that leaderless thing, because we were of the opinion you're not leaderless. At least that was my opinion.
Right.
There is nothing like a leaderless group. There may not be someone standing on a rostrum saying, "I am the leader."
Right.
There are influencers.
Yes, there are dominant voices that are heard.
Right.
That's leadership.
Yes, it is. It is, and it absolutely so. So I think, and that's why we said when we started, we were united by the leading idea,
Yeah.
and they were amplified by the leading voices, and that will continue, and it permeates
In the various spaces.
Yes, in the various spaces, it still continues, and that now when we are saying this is what the collective is, because the people who we've said these are the people who we will give the limelight or whatever are people who want the utmost good for the people, for the collective. And that's what part of even what we're curbing, and we're saying we will not allow corruption amongst our ranks, just the same way we do not allow it in government, because that microcosm that you've talked about, which is a very clear depiction of things as they are and things to come, if we are going to expect that of the politicians, if we let it reign free here, and the struggle just continues with us knowing these people and fostering them, and then just saying, oh, now currently they're part of the struggle. What if the struggle runs for 8 years? Now we have a rich person whose only
Who
thing
has been struggling.
Yes, who was in the struggle. Now when they get in, they just go in for the kill.
Accountability both ways.
Yes.
Accountability within
And without.
And without.
Absolutely.
And what I hear you saying is now increasing civic awareness, using those spaces and opportunity to create more awareness on what needs to happen.
Yes.
For example, IBC reconstitution is going to happen. Then you'll need to register as voters. Those that didn't, the 8 million plus that were should have registered as voters.
Right.
Make sure that they register as voters. Make sure then that you encourage more and more people. I'm seeing a lot of interesting things. Accountability, for example, people just going and looking at Auditor General's reports.
Yes.
And control of budget reports and saying, so this is what we are digging out of this, and exposing these things. It creates more awareness. And I think it's a good thing.
It is. I have people who now just have made it their life's mission to tell us an update. These are the public participation things for all the bills that are going to be tabled. Someone just gives us a proper schedule.
Yep.
People who've just said, I'll take this particular ministry. Guys like Professor, and now we're asking how we're going to help. That now we are going to harass BTalk next. We want our IDs out. We signed a petition when we were in court, Juicy, on Friday for IABC. So we are doing this thing, and we'll march on. Yes,
Keep doing it.
Right.
Accountability both ends.
Asante.
Kasmuel McOure is an activist. He's a youth. He's been here. He's been our guest.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.